Hello, my name is Doug Levine and I'm one of the geography teachers at Long Sixth Form College, and I just want to take you through a quick presentation to give you an idea of what the study of geography would be like if you chose to come and do it here at college. No, it's not quite the same as a face-to-face meeting, but I think in these strange times I think this is probably the best we can do. Okay, so we start with a couple of quotes. First from Michael Palin, a very general quote: "Geography is a subject which holds the key to our future." And most certainly it is. We look at all the issues we're seeing around us at the moment with our global pandemic or climate change or resource use or the loss of biodiversity or the great pressures there are on other resources. Well, this is all about our future, isn't it? We need to create a sustainable path into the future to create a better world for everyone. And that's what geography is about. I think if we look at the image in the left-hand side here, this is what geography is not about. I think sometimes people say, "Oh, geography is about maps, it's all there." Absolutely, everything about the world is there. It's at our fingertips, isn't it, on the internet? However, making sense of it is what we do as geographers. So we try not to do lots and lots of description. We tend to try and make sense of the world rather than just describe it. So the left-hand image is really not what we're all about. I think the quotation from Barack Obama is very good here. The study of geography is more than just memorizing places on a map. It's certainly not that, is it? It's about understanding the complexity of our world and then using that understanding, of course, to make sensible decisions about the future. Okay, so what will you study? Well, your exam board is Edexcel, and it breaks your study down into 4 areas, and those 4 areas are as follows. The image gives you an idea of one of the first areas. The first area is called dynamic landscapes, and we've chosen to study glaciation and how ice sheets and glaciers create the most spectacular landscapes on Earth. And that means we're not doing coasts. So for those of you that are hoping to do lots of work on coasts, well, we've chosen something different. We wanted to explore something new rather than just repeat everything all over again with your coasts work. Tectonic processes and hazards, again, earthquakes and volcanoes, something you're very familiar with, and we'll just try and work out why it is that people live in these challenging landscapes and how they best should live in those landscapes. Obviously not so much of an issue for us in Cambridgeshire, probably one of the safest parts of the world in terms of tectonics, but very important elsewhere in the world. Area study 2, as we can guess from our big coronavirus there, all linked up around the world, is human geography, and is looking at things like globalization, that shrinking and linking of the world, and how that's accelerated over the last few decades, and what this means for the world. It's no surprise, is it, that New York and London, the 2 most globalized cities in the world with the most links to the rest of the world, were the 2 cities so far affected most by coronavirus. But they're also 2 of the most successful places in the world because they've linked in so much to globalization. So we look at those sorts of ideas. We also look at a bit of regeneration and why different places change and how they change over time and how they might need to be improved. So the area of study 2 is much more human geography. If you think about area study 1, that was physical geography. Here's a clue to the 3rd area of study, and this is looking at the amount of times where renewables actually created more energy than fossil fuels in the UK. And we can see 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, we can see that over time renewables like solar and wind power have actually produced more and more energy, and it's certainly a trend we need to look at. And that's of course because area of study 3 is looking at our physical resource use and those incredibly important life support systems, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, and of course tied in with the two of those, climate change and how we tie and deal with climate change. So that's area study 3, very much based around sustainability and the resourceful support systems that keep the Earth ticking over. Here's a clue to your final area of study. Again, human geography here, superpowers. This is the study of the most powerful countries on Earth and looking at how that power shifts over time. We use a bit of history here, but mostly we stick in the modern day and we look at this great challenge at the moment between China and the US. The US still the dominant superpower, but China is becoming ever more powerful. And we look at what that means for the world. This also ties into the idea of sovereignty, the idea that the nation state is becoming less and less powerful as time progresses, and we look at what this all means for different countries. Of course, our march away from the EU and was sort of driven around sovereignty. Those who wanted to leave the EU used the words take back control, and that's what sovereignty is all about. So we look at those sorts of issues as well. Trips, in terms of trips, you need to do at least 4 days of field work when you do your A-level geography. Well, I'm sure you're not surprised at that, and I'm sure you were hoping that you'd get out of the classroom. Those 4 days of field work are used to develop skills, and those skills you will then use to create your own piece of coursework on a title that you choose. Everyone doesn't do the same coursework, and what we find is that on average about half of the students, and particularly those students who are more into their physical geography, choose to go on the residential field trip to the Lake District. And here are some images of the students there. They spend 4 days, or nearly 5 days actually, studying the physical geography of the Lake District and produce projects based on that. Those who are more into their human geography, or who just don't really want to go away on the residential, tend to do day trips, and the day trips are to places like Thetford, which is a rural town in Norfolk that's needed to be regenerated. Also trips to Cambridge to look at globalization in particular, and maybe some aspects of redevelopment, and also trips to woodland areas like Wandlebury to look to estimate the amount of carbon and look at carbon management. So those of you who aren't going on the residential would go on the day trips, and then that would give you lots of skills you could then use to create your own piece of coursework. So that's the way trips and coursework all functions. And I think you have something like, well, you do have 20% of your grade is from your coursework. The rest is from exams. So how will you be examined? Those exams are pretty long, and they have some long questions in them as well. So paper 1 is really looking at all the physical geography, ties together the different areas of study that have physical geography in them. So everything from tectonics to glaciation to managing carbon and water. Again, 2¼ hours, mostly based around longer exam questions. Exactly the same for the human geography. So that's everything from globalization to superpowers to sovereignty. Again, 2¼ hours, mostly long questions, and again another 30% contribution to your final grade. Paper 3, nothing new in paper 3. All that's really testing is what we call your synopticity, and that's how well you link together key themes from paper 1 and 2 into longer questions. And again, that's just worth 20%, with the final 20% being your coursework. Very briefly, just to make a point really, there are definite command words that are defined by your exam board, and note one of them is not describe. So again, we won't expect students to have big long descriptions or big long described case studies. We'll expect them to evaluate or assess or to explain and use bits of information from their various case studies to do that. And that's the only reason I put the command words up there for you. It does mean that, of course, most questions, most of the marks will be from questions worth between 6 to 24 marks. That might sound quite daunting to some of you, but don't worry, over the course of 2 years, and it does take 2 years to develop that skill, we will teach you an appropriate writing style, and we will give you lots of practice in how to tackle these longer questions. But really, it's really back to our first slide. It's not about just describing things and looking at patterns. It's more about using the information that's out there and applying it well to make sense of the world, as Barack Obama said. In terms of speakers and events, just to give you an idea from last year, a couple of visiting speakers we had last year. Fascinating talk from Dr. Christine Batchelor, who's at Cambridge University in the Scott Polar Institute. She was part of the team that actually mapped the sea floor of Antarctica, the South Pole, and she gave us a fascinating insight into how the images we see in our textbooks, such as the retreat of ice in Antarctica, how that was all mapped and the science behind that. So that's the sort of visiting speaker you might expect to see in college. We've also last year had a town planner, someone who works in the planning department for East Cambridgeshire, and she explained what it's like to be a town planner, which is one of those jobs that lots of geography students go into after their geography degree, and quite often a master's in town planning as well. And again, that was very, very informative. Also, because we're in Cambridge, of course, you get access to lots of different extra lectures going on. Cambridge, the Geographical Association, has lectures each year which students are invited to. The Cambridge University Festival of Science had a geography focus this year, and I'm sure will next year, and again invited students. And even the Cambridge University Geography Society this year actually invited some of our students, particularly those aiming to sort of push A's into A stars, to their lectures as well. So after your geography A level, what might you do? Well, the sorts of subjects that students choose, some of those popular ones are up here. So for instance, environmental science. That's a real focus on our relationship with the environment and how we manage it. This one's the University of East Anglia, the UEA, which is fairly close to us and very popular and has an amazing reputation as a climate science centre. That's very popular with students. We've talked about urban planning and also rural planning. Again, there are degrees in how to become a planning officer and how to work in that sort of area. Down here we've got the National Oceanographic Centre, which is part of and linked to Southampton University. Again, oceanography and ocean science and marine biology and all of those sorts of areas have got very well linked to geography, and students, many students sort of have ended up down there over the years. Those who are more into human geography, things like international relations, particularly those who do sociology as well, and politics, again, are the sort of degree areas that people go into. We mustn't forget, just good old standard geography. I was just talking to a student a week or so ago who's off to Durham. And here's a little image of Durham here. and to do geography. And you can do human geography, you can do physical geography, you can do human and physical geography, you combine geography with all sorts of things. So there are lots of options for you. Mustn't forget apprenticeships. Just got a student who's just started an apprenticeship as an accountant with, I think, Bidwell's. And again, having a good predicted grade in geography is the sort of thing that really helps there. To finish off, a quote by Judy Martz, an American politician who died a couple of years ago. Everything has to do with geography. And actually, if I finish that quote, geography has to do with everything. And I think that is a good way to end this presentation. So I hope that that gave you a flavour of things, and you've sort of got a bit of a better idea in these strange times about what it would be like to do geography here at college. And hopefully I will see you in the fairly near future as a student.